Hello my loves, welcome to a new video. If you're new here, my name is Hannah and I like to take you along my little reading journeys. We are about to start a new book today and this is just going to be a very quick little intro because I do not have much time because I'm about to head out. But I have been slowly vlogging my way through the Storygraph Read the World challenge, and the next title I have picked up, as you will probably know from the thumbnail of this video, is a South African title, and it is The Promise by Damon Galgut. Now, I know this was, as it said there, it won the Booker in 2021. I wasn't much of a prize follower back in 2021, so I really don't know much about this, but I have heard it's very good, and I'm getting big, bleak vibes from it. So maybe I will try and intersperse this vlog with some happy things. Apologies for the state of this book. I did just realise it had a bog off sticker on it, which really annoys me. And how do you feel about these covers? Because I like the short situation. I'm not a fan. But yeah, so we're going to be reading this book. I don't know anything about it, except I think it's a family drama and it is set in South Africa. Let's go read. I'm on my way to the theatre, but I am planning on getting there early, so I will be starting it there, which is why I very quickly wanted to say hello now, and the next time I see you, I will have read some stuff. Hello. Firstly, sorry for the slightly odd framing. You're connected to a charger, which means you have to be very close to the wall. As I think you will have seen from that little clip of B-roll, I have started reading The Promise by Damon Galgut. So I think I did a very bad job of introducing this video because I was in such a rush, and I'm gonna carry on being slightly disappointing because this book is in 4 parts and my intention was to read part 1 and then update you. But for a little while now, I've been dissatisfied with my bookcases and the way they are arranged. I've always been an alphabetical gal. On a whim, about 5 months ago, I changed the way I organised my bookcases, and I did it by colour, which I know is very in. But here's the thing, that made me realise how little colour I have on my bookcases. Most of my books are white or black. So it doesn't really work. It's not very satisfying, and I'm not finding it like a nice browsable format. So as I've been reading this book, which I have been enjoying and I will talk to you about in a second, I've got just a very strong compulsion to rearrange my bookcases, and I'm not going to be able to really think about anything else until I go do that. So that's what's going to happen imminently, and now that I've said it and acknowledged it, we can talk about this book for a bit before I go and think about how I want to do my bookcases. So, this book, so far, I am enjoying. It is following a family in the outskirts of Pretoria in South Africa, and largely Afrikaans family, and the mother has just died, Rachel, and we begin sort of by following her daughter. We find out that the mother has died at the same time as the daughter, Amor, who is sort of teenager. We don't know exactly how old she is. I think maybe like preteen, maybe like 13ish. And Amor is very Amor. I'm not sure. But yeah, we're following her for a bit, and she is very much in denial about the fact that her mother has died. She gets picked up from school by her aunt, who it becomes very clear this is her aunt, who is her father's sister, so not a blood relation to her mother who's just died. Becomes very obvious that she didn't think much of the mother, and that a big part of that is to do with religion. So her mother, Rachel, was Jewish, had sort of, I think, been slightly had either left the Jewish faith or was exiled because she married Amor's father, who was not Jewish. But for whatever reason, she had sort of turned her back on her Jewish faith and her Jewish heritage. And as she got older, decided to return to that faith. And so she has requested a Jewish funeral, a Jewish burial, which has left the husband's family, who are Dutch Reformed Christians, very put out, let's say. But there is a lot of tension between the different family members, and a lot of intolerance, which is not always pleasant to read. But at the moment, I think Damon Galgut is managing quite well, because the characters who are the least accepting, tolerant, nice, are criticised within the book. So it's not, it's not problematic at the moment. But yeah, it's interesting, the writing style. So that's sort of the inciting incident, is the loss of this mother and her imminent funeral. It moves quite fluidly between different characters and their perspectives, and it does that thing which quite a few contemporary books do, where they don't use quotation marks, and so sometimes it's a little you're not 100% sure when you read something if you're reading something that someone has said, something someone has thought, or a piece of narration, and there is a you that has crept into the narration on a couple of instances, and I've been a bit like, oh, is this book written with a slight second person slant, or was that a piece of speech that I've missed? But I'm not stressing about it too much, because there is a real permeability to the storytelling. We're going in and out of different characters' heads, we're following different characters around. There is a period of time where we see all the various family members as they're sleeping, and we get glimpses of their dreams, and there has been a part towards, so I'm about 50 pages in, and we've just had a section where Rachel's ghost or spirit is sort of following some people around. So I think that slight ambiguity in the narrative voice is intentional, and it's only confused me a couple of times. On the whole, at the minute, I think it's quite successful. But we do also know what the promise is, which I realise now. I just quickly read the back before I started filming this, and it tells you what the promise is on the blurb. But because I'm not a big one for reading blurbs, I read them if I'm thinking of like buying a book, but I don't like to read them right before I actually read it, because I kind of prefer to just find out what the story is by reading the story. Novel of me, I know. So there is a woman who works at the family farm, or at the family house. I don't know if it's a working farm, but it was definitely bought as a farm, called Salome. She is a black woman, but she sort of came with the property when Amma's father bought the land. And the promise was witnessed by Amma when her mother was sick. So Rachel had been ill for at least kind of half a year. And Amma had witnessed her parents have a conversation where Rachel had made the father, Mani, promise that Salome would be given the house that she currently lives in. That she would be the owner of that property as someone who is... Salome basically had done most of the caring for Rachel, as well as being a domestic worker within the house. And Rachel makes Mani promise that is something he'll do once she dies, that Salome will be given the house. And the vibe I'm getting is that possibly that promise may be broken. So there is a lot going on in this book in terms of looking at tribalism and race, and particularly, I mean, you kind of can't get away from it in South African literature. I haven't read tons of South African literature, but obviously, the shadow of apartheid looms large over any kind of social commentary I've ever read. I know she wasn't born in South Africa, but this is reminding me a lot of some of Doris Lessing's work, particularly Martha Quest and parts of the Golden Notebook. But yeah, so there's a lot of heavy thematic stuff going on. The characters are very interesting, but it's early days yet, and I'm not 100% sure where it's going. I do know that the sections are... So the first section is Ma, so Rachel. The second section is Pa, so Mani, and then I think it's Amma's other two siblings, Astrid and Anton. So I think this is going to have a kind of generational spanning. But yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. I think I can see why it was Booker recommended. So I will check in with you again about that when I've read more. Now let's talk bookcases. So here's my thinking. So what I did do when I last rearranged my cases, and is something that I'm going to keep, is I separated my read books from my unread books, because I wanted to be able to see at a glance, and know where to go on my shelves for the books I haven't read yet. And I've been thinking, and I'm going to keep that. So there will be, I think it's about 3.5 shelves, maybe, across two cases where I haven't read the books yet. And I think what I'm going to try, because I think I'm just going to treat this as, I tried the colour thing, didn't work for me. But I don't think I'm going to rearrange them now to how I will always rearrange my books. I quite like the idea of arranging my bookcases in different ways to sort of try and uncover and find things out about any patterns in my reading, or any patterns in the books that I own, or books that I've read versus books I haven't read. So I think I may arrange them by publisher. I have not always historically been very good at picking books from smaller presses and things like that, but that I think is largely because for a big part of my reading prior to maybe 2020, I was reading mostly kind of backlist books, classics, and things like that. And so I wasn't reading a lot of contemporary stuff that had been published sort of that year or in the last 3 or 4 years. I don't really know why that was, but that's just what I've been doing. And I guess if you're not reading like recent publications, I guess I'd never really approached reading by thinking, oh, I'll look at the publishers that have published books that I like and then see what else is on their lists. And now, because of the way I'm reading and the sorts of books that I'm gravitating towards is changing or evolving a little bit, I thought now might be an interesting time to lay out my books like that and see, are there some publishers where actually I've loved all of the books that I've read from that publisher, and that's probably going to be one that I should look at again. Now, there is going to be a lot of Penguin and Picador and some of the bigger publishers on my cases, and I'm aware of that. So there may not be tons of intelligence, but even it would be interesting to just be able to look at my shelves and see how many books I own that are from smaller presses, because it's just not really something I know much about. This is step one in possibly making a bit of a database of my bookcases on a spreadsheet. I was listening to Books Unbound, which is a great podcast if you are not familiar with it, when Ariel was cataloguing all of her books. Now she's got a lot more books than me, but I do quite like the idea of cataloguing, and I think this may be like step one. But yeah, I've got a brainworm about it. It needs to happen or I'm not going to be able to concentrate on anything else. So I am going to start on that process now, and I will check in with you in a little bit. I've got no idea how long this is going to take, but probably a lot longer than I think it's going to. But I realised there is a new National album that I did not know had come out, so I'm going to listen to the new album from the National and just have some fun looking at all of my books for a little while. So this is probably going to be the next little chunk. It's going to be about bookcases. If you have zero interest in that, when I'm editing the video, I will pop up on here like the timestamp that you need to skip to if you are not at all interested in bookcases and just want to get back to talking about this. But yeah, let's go do that. Bye. a bit regret this. So I've done my red books. So those fuck off piles at the back are Penguin. So we've got Penguin, Vintage, Picador and Faber and Bloomsbury are the most common. And then loads of books where I've just got one. Now, the rabbit hole that I've started, and the reason I regret my decision, is what I do about imprints. So we've got a lot of books that are like an imprint of HarperCollins or an imprint of Hachette. But it's interesting. I mean, actually, obviously there's a lot of Penguin there. But the vast majority of the books that are from big publishers, from what I can see, are classics. So like I've got tons of Penguin classics, Penguin modern classics, Collins classics, Wordsworth classics, vintage classics. So I'm not feeling too bad about that. I'm already looking at the shelves of my unread books, and it looks like there's a bit more sort of publisher diversity on there, so that's nice. But yeah, I'm also incredibly sweaty. Like, why does it make you so warm just taking books off a shelf and putting them back on? Hey ho. I also don't know. I have some sets of books which I think I am going to have separately somewhere. So like the Dark Materials trilogy and the first two in the Secret Commonwealth. I've got a set of E.M. Forster books. I've got 3 volumes of War and Peace. I've got a Lord of the Rings and Hobbit set. And I kind of want to keep them separate because I also have like the ones that have been tricky are like where I've bought random second-hand editions. So like I've got a couple of like Australian or like American public like editions of books, which I've not intentionally bought that edition. It's just, you know, I've bought it secondhand on like A&B books, and that's what I have left with. So, I think I might have like a classics section. So all the Penguin classics, all the Collins classics, all the Wordsworth classics together. Yeah. And it's like the order that you put them in. Because what I don't want to do is put all of the indie presses like on the bottom shelf, because that's rubbish. But then Ali Smith is published by Penguin and she's my favourite author, so I don't want to bung all the Penguins at the bottom because then Ali's at the bottom. I want Ali to be at the bottom. I'm very quickly losing confidence in this decision. Morning. Bookcases later, but you know how I said yesterday that I wasn't stressing too much about this you that slips in occasionally into the narrative voice? It's bothering me a bit more. For example, there's a paragraph here talking about Rachel. To say Rachel was a sociable person. She had a lot of friends, but the benches are mostly, so this is at Rachel's funeral.
but the benches are mostly packed with the Jewish side of the family. Like Afrikaners in that way, blood is the thickest glue of all. For years, she didn't see or speak to most of them, so they were invisible. But here they are today, throngs of faces you haven't seen in years. A few still with names attached, aunts and uncles and cousins with their offspring and familiars. Rachel's mother, your arch-enemy, turns sharply away when she sees you, no quarter given even now. I don't know who that you is. It's not anyone in the family that I know of. Yeah, and then like 2 pages later, they're talking about the so the rabbi is giving the eulogy at Rachel's funeral. And it's, I believe it would have pleased her to see you all here today, both sides of the family, Jewish and non-Jewish, English-speaking and Afrikaans. It would have felt right to her that everybody should come together for her sake. The world is imperfect, yes, but at moments like this, it can be whole, etc., etc. You see his point, how Rachel made short-sighted choices which left her dissatisfied. Now, at first I thought you was the reader, but that previous bit about Rachel's mother being your arch enemy now makes me think that you is a specific person. And I'm doing that thing where I'm like, have I missed something? Or is this going to be dealt with later and I should just go with it? I mean, I'm just going to go with it. But it's definitely this like slippage of time and space, like I was saying yesterday, between the prose and the dialogue. Feels like he's ramping it up a little bit. So there were 2 examples that I've just read in this bit. Where are we? So Tanny Marina, who is the aunt who's not very nice, is speaking, and she says, "That girl isn't getting a house," Tanny Marina says. No, I'm sorry. You can forget that story right now. She busied herself with tidying away, and you can't... Can you see that? So when I read that initially, I thought she was still talking. So it's like she busies herself with tidying away, like she's talking about the girl. And then it's not until you get to the second clause of the sentence that you realise, oh no, she's not speaking anymore. That's describing what she's doing. And so you get these like jolts. And there was another one where it's like he changed. So yeah, so we move from... We're with the husband at the funeral, Marnie. Marnie hunches his shoulders against them all. Too much has happened to pretend it doesn't matter. He prayed long and hard last night, and he believes the Lord wants him to be there to show grace and set a Christian example. Faith means you have to wrestle with yourself, can't just hate them and be done. But it's hard for him, much harder than he imagined, to be sitting among these people who have taken her away from me with their strange customs. So that switch from him to me is in one sentence. It's in the same sentence. So, but it's hard for him, who've taken her away from me. So there's this where you're like put inside a character, but then kind of booted out and then pulled back in. And I didn't mean to jostle you quite so much as I demonstrated that, sorry. But yeah, it's interesting, but a little distracting at the moment. But it might just be because I'm not fully into it yet. But yeah, that is Morning Musings. Probably the next thing you'll see will be my bookcases, which I am 7 out of 10 happy with. Hi. So, I will show you my bookcases, but I haven't picked up any books to read. in about 3 days. which is not like me, and is entirely the fault of Carrie Can Read, because I fell into an accidental deep dive of her doing plot summaries of Sarah J. Maas books. I've never read a Sarah J. Maas book, but I have been slightly intrigued because I know they're fucking everywhere, and I was like, great, this way I get to know what they're about without having to read them. But I think I've watched about 9 hours of Carrie's videos in like all of what would normally have been my reading time for the last 3 days, because it is a work week, and it's been busy at work because 2 4-day weeks on the bounce, trying to fit 10 days work into 8 days, etc. But yeah, I thought I would just give you a very brief update on my lack of reading. My friends, my pals, so little reading has been happening, but I am, because I know you've been on tenterhooks, going to show you my new bookcases. So let me flip the camera around and show you what we've gone for. Okay, so here's what we decided. We decided that if the books were going to be, like if I was doing this by publisher so that I could understand more the kinds of books that individual publishers publish and how I feel about them and how I like them, I decided to treat imprints as their own thing, because obviously they have their own like brand and style. And then I had a big panic about how I was going to order them on the shelves, and I straight up just went for alphabetical by publisher. So we're beginning with Fourth Estate, and then into like Abacus and Arrow, and then da 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 da. As I suspected, we got a whole chunk of Faber here. We've got a lot of Oxford classics. At first, I didn't like how uniform this looked, but I think because the rest is pretty reliably chaotic, I don't mind these odd like moments. And down here too, with a chunk of Penguin. And then are we still, yes, Penguin, Picador. Not as much Picador that I've read as I thought. And like loads of vintage. So that is, all of this is red. And then over here, we may need a light on. Not better. So over here, haven't worked out where Ali's going to go. Not even my full Ali collection, but I really want the seasonal quartet to sit somewhere where they're a bit special. So Ali will find a home. So we've gone for like sets. And then I have put the cloth-bound classics together along with like fancy editions. Like I've got one of the, the fancy Macmillan, those kids. And then I have like a chunk of old vintagey, I say a chunk, it's not that many, titles that they're just there. And then we come into unread. So I've done exactly the same thing. So these are my unread books. I got like a quite a bit of Fourth Estate unread, like Abacus coming through. We've got Bloomsbury, etc. Need to water my fern. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 shelves of unread. So this is unread. And then down here is my overflow shelf of read books. So this is vintage up to, I don't know what is it Wordsworth there at the end? I think it's Wordsworth is the like last in the alphabet for me. And then like just straight up just got the Wheel of Time down here because they're really short, those editions, and they fit nicely on that shelf because I I am pretty much, even though technically this is a bookcase with movable shelves, I've painted it and the shelves are not all that movable anymore. So that's where we're at. I'm not obsessed with it, but I am interested in the intelligence that I may gather by doing it. So like, I don't know. Some of these may be like absolute standouts. Like, I'm really annoyed. I don't have anything unread by Charco Press, and I've liked a couple of their books. So, like we'll see. We'll see how it goes. And then we've just got a little stack of hardbacks down there because I couldn't get the shelves to fit properly. So yeah, that's that. And then I haven't been reading too much because Carrie Can Read has really done a number on me. And I've been just watching a lot of books. Like, this is kind of how my reading reignited, though, when I first got back into reading, is I found BookTube, spent a lot of time watching people reading books before eventually being like, okay, maybe I will read books. I have read another chunk of The Promise, though. And I think that whole, like, second person bit is just like a writing effect to pull you into the character a little bit. I don't think it is addressing an unseen... Like, I don't think we're playing a role as a reader. I don't think. There is a pattern emerging in the sections, which I feel like I can't talk too much about because it might be spoilery. But I'm assuming you're supposed to figure it out quite quickly, at least kind of like partway through the second part. So now, having got a little bit into the third part, I can sort of feel like I know where it's going. But it's really interesting. So each of the parts are 10 years apart. So it's quite... You kind of like get immersed in this sort of short period of this family. And then part one ends. And then part two picks up and it's 9 years later. And you get put in another moment with this family. And that's quite interesting. I've got a couple of niggles with it, in that because of those time jumps, I think sometimes I don't necessarily believe the characters. Like when one character can read another character really well, and so they can like tell you things and do like a bit of like character exposition, right? But all the bits that we're seeing of some of these characters, they don't really get on and don't have much of a relationship, but yet sometimes seem to have a really strong, clear and correct read on their family members. And I just I don't buy it 100% of the time. He's a really nice writer, though. There are moments that I'm really enjoying. And yeah, it's interesting. Learning a little bit. It's quite nice because I don't know much about South African history or politics beyond apartheid, to be honest. And so I've been having to do like a little bit, not tons, not like an oppressive amount of Googling, but a little bit of Googling of like some names and some dates to try and like situate it, because I assume if you were reading this with like a decent amount of like context in your backpack, that like picking up on those cues would be more fluent. I don't have that, so I'm having to work a little bit harder, but hey, that's the point of doing the Read Around the World challenge, right? Read stuff from cultures and countries where I haven't got a huge amount of experience. So yeah, It's Saturday today on bank holiday weekend 2, so we have a king now, so that's nice for us, I guess. Yeah, I'm hoping to get some more reading done and actually have some like focused chat with you guys about it, because I basically, the last time until today, the last time I'd read any of The Prophet was last weekend. So I didn't read anything this week. I listened to a bit of like audiobook stuff during the week, but I just haven't read, because it was very, very important to me to hear Carrie Conread do the entire ACOTAR series. So sometimes reading just be like that, though. You know what I mean? Cool. So my curry is going to be here soon. And I will catch you later. Because I bought a new tripod, which means I can actually like sit in a chair and talk to you and not sit on the floor. It's very exciting. I finished my book. And it's a puzzler. Do you ever finish a book sometimes and genuinely not know what you think of it? Because like, as I think I sort of said before, that there's a lot in here that is doing interesting stuff. And I think on the whole, I found it more interesting than affecting. And that's obviously like fine. And I think that was probably, are you on the wonk? Fuck it. I'm not gonna pretend this channel has any production value. What am I on about? Yeah, so it's obviously fine, because some books just are sort of more cerebral and intellectual than
emotional. But I think I was surprised by that in this book, because this is like a family saga, right? So it's the sort of thing that I would expect to feel something. But I didn't really feel much. Towards the end, I felt this sort of really profound and sad sense of waste and missed opportunity. And I think that is right, is what I think that is intended by Damon Galgut. But I felt it, you know, like more on a, yeah, like I'm going to sound like I'm just repeating myself. But yeah, on a kind of brain level and not at a gut level. So let me cycle back a bit. Let's get out of there, Calithea. Jeez. So I'm curious about why I feel this way about this book, because it, on the one hand, it is a book that is not scared to show you how flawed people are. And I'm all for flawed characters. I'm not the sort of person who needs to read a book that's just got tons and tons of likable characters in. I'm okay and happy for there to be unlikable characters. But despite what I have been banging on about for this entire vlog, about this sort of this permeability of the narrative voice, where every so often it flits into first and second person as well as being predominantly from third person, you would think that that would make you feel more connected to the characters, but I felt held at a distance from these people. And I think that is partly structural, because like all 4 parts, it's basically 4 decades. So you get these brief instances, 2 or 3 days really, every 10 years. So it's already going to be difficult for you to really get inside how those characters are feeling. Just kind of like, this is not a very big book. It's under 300 pages, just under 300 pages, but under 300 pages. And the main character, and I hesitate to almost to describe her as that really, because when I think of Amma as a character, I think of us being on this, we're like orbiting her. It's like we, the reader, in this narrative that Damon Galgut has created, are orbiting Amma. So it always feels connected to her, but you're never meeting her. You're always at that distance. You're not in it. And I found it quite, yeah, it's funny. When I was sitting here with my thoughts, and I have mentioned her before on my channel. I have a very good friend, Evie, and we have almost identical taste in books. Almost identical. So far, the only book that we haven't really agreed on is Eileen by Atessa Moshfegh. I'm a fan, Evie's not a fan. But when I put that I was reading this, she'd commented something like, I'll be interested to see what you think of that. And I was like, okay, interesting. So I knew she'd read it. And so earlier I was like, I finished it. Can you tell me what you think of it? And she sort of said something similar, that it didn't, you just didn't really feel very connected to it. And that at points you worried that you weren't intellectually grasping what the book was about because you couldn't really feel like you were quite in it. And then, so I already felt better knowing that, like, I'm like, okay, so I probably do think what I think then, because we tend to think similarly. And then she said that she was on a train. She has this amazing anecdote where she was on a train with Sarah Winman, who's like one of her favourite authors. They weren't travelling together or anything, but she met her on a train and they were kind of sat near each other or whatever. And at the time, Sarah Winman was reading this book. And Evie had like struck up a conversation with her because she's wonderful like that, and said, you know, I found a big book. And Sarah Winman had asked her if she'd read this, and Evie, being Evie, said yes. And she gave her honest sort of opinion, like, you know, like, there were parts of it that I liked, but I felt a bit. And Sarah Winman agrees with us. I mean, so yeah, it's interesting. It's very, very, I would love, if you've read this book, to hear your comments down below. So this won the Booker, and I can see why. But again, like, I just found it a little bit of a frustrating experience as a reader. Even calling it this, The Promise, has this, because it was about the promise that was made to Salome, but also the promise that this book was going to be about that was also unfulfilled, as the promise is unfulfilled. Do you know what I mean? It's clever, and I don't deny that Damon Galgut is clever, but I just think I want to love a book more than I want to be impressed by it. And so ultimately, this was like middling. Parts of it really liked. Still absolutely can't stand this cover. And also I spilled oat milk at the bottom of my bag, and now the entire book's a little oaty smelling. Yeah, Evie works in publishing, and informed me, I can't remember if I told you this already, but this is basically, because you know I'd said before I don't like this, it's called a double cover. And I hate the name of it as much as I hate its existence. Don't do this, publishers, because also it's more expensive. It's more expensive to do that, and it's just doesn't feel nice. Anyway, that's not Damon Galgut's fault. That's vintage doing a stupid cover. But yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts down below if you've read it, or if you're interested in giving it a go. Like I said, there is a lot to admire in here, and if you are, I might just be the wrong reader for it. But yeah, lots to admire. This was obviously read for the South Africa prompt. If you have any recommendations for other titles by South African authors, I would really, really like to see those down below. And if you are still here, thank you very much. If this is your first time on my channel and you've enjoyed it, please do subscribe and stick around. There'll be more of these to come, plus other nonsense and ramblings. And I post about everything I'm reading also on Instagram. So follow me there. My handle is in the box down below. And yeah. That has been this. I'm very excited about my new tripod and the fact that I may get to sit in furniture again. How exciting. Yeah. Bye, friends.